Hey, good day, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. It's always a joy to be with the rabbi and hear the lovely light of Torah shining out of the nation of Israel, and no one better than Rabbi Coffman to share the beauty of the Ethics of the Father with us. We've been going at it for quite a while. I think this is about our 110th episode. Let's just jump right in with the rabbi and see how he's doing today. Shalom, Rabbi. You're live on the air. We're going to turn the class over to you. So good to see you and be with you. I'm sorry your Celtics lost in the NBA Finals, but they did put on a good show. They had a lot of turnovers the last couple of games, but that's the way the ball bounces.
That's it. What can we do? Guess we didn't pray hard enough. Guess they didn't deserve, whatever the case is. But I think everyone would agree they were playing with house money, which means no one expected them to get there, certainly. So, okay, that's, on to the next sport, right? On to the next, on to the next thing. So we've been speaking about this Mishna, chapter Mishnah 11. And spoke quite a bit last week. Spoke about education and the pitfalls of education, especially Jewish education. What's going on out there and whatever the craziness, craziness of the world, etc. So the Mishnah says, this is the part we've been focusing on, and that is Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, that says that praiseworthy is she who gave birth to him. Right? So again, he went, not only did he go in the right path, but he surpassed, not only that, but he went, he went so far in how much he knew, and how great he was, how righteous he was, in other things. So if a person goes in the right direction, whether they become, a true Torah giant, or not, people will say, well, thank God, his Rebbe taught him Torah. Or thank God, his father taught him Torah. Right? That's a huge compliment. Because then they realize where it comes from. But at the same time, a person doesn't do the right thing, and we've spoken about this, makes us look a lot worse. Because, imagine the New York Times writes an article, and they write an article against somebody, whatever the case is, and let's say they're guilty. Let's say they're guilty of libel. Now what happens? They have to give an apology. Now I would think 9 times out of 10, when the famous, the holy, the New York Times, has to give an apology, where does the apology go? Front page? Never. Second page? Never. Right? Probably page 247, and you need, in the print is so small, you need bifocals to be able to read it. Right? That's how bad it is. Because what's the point? The point is, once the damage is done, you can't undo the damage. If a Jew, secular, religious, does something wrong, and they get hammered, meaning the Jewish people in general get hammered, how do you get away from that? How do you fix it? There's no way to fix it. Because people are going to have these stereotypes. And the stereotypes stay for a long time. It's not, something like that, very hard to fix. Extremely hard to fix. So, if a person goes in the right path, they do the right thing, that's a whole different thing. Right? It could be, people will not say, well, that has to do with Judaism. People say, well, you got lucky. Or if your kids are doing the right thing, you got lucky. They're like, Judaism has nothing to do with it. Their education has nothing to do with it. Right? You got lucky. Now, we have to pray for our kids. There's no question. Every single day, we need to pray for them. They should stay in the right path, go in the right path. This world's a crazy world. We understand it's a crazy world. So, if the child does the right thing, goes in the right path, so you say, well, isn't that what they're supposed to do? Didn't we see that before, previously? Why is the person going to think they're the greatest thing since sliced cheese? For the sole reason that you're created to do that. You're created to learn Torah. That's what you're born to do. So if you're born to learn Torah, why are you going to think you're so great? But at the same time, in the secular world, They're not going to attach person's character traits, qualities, this, that, to the Torah they learn. Now, obviously, it's their problem. 100% it's their problem. But they'll never give Judaism the time of day. Because they're going to say it's your luck. Whether it's good, whether it's bad. They'll say, that's what it is. Had nothing to do with training. Had nothing to do with education. You can have people educated, in the best of places. In the top yeshivas. And they may not come out the way you want. It can happen. Right? There are a million reasons why. It could possibly happen. But it doesn't matter. The point is, Torah is not an inheritance. Just because the father's a rabbi, grandfather's a rabbi, in generations, that kid, he's got big shoes to fill. Doesn't mean they're going to do what they need to do. They have a better chance because they have a higher degree of pedigree. I think that's true. They have a greater pedigree, but that doesn't mean in any way, shape, or form it's going to amount to anything. It helps. It should definitely help. Listen, you see siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, that are religious, that can have an unbelievable influence. Tremendous influence, right? Does that mean, that kid is going to stay on the right path? No guarantee. There are two things guaranteed in life. Death and taxes, right? Not necessarily in that order. Those are the guarantees. Everything else, no guarantees. There's zero guarantees here. So does that mean I just give up? I don't put my best foot forward? No. I have to put my best foot forward. I have to work hard. It's what I have to do. It's what my obligation is. So someone goes in the right path, right, as we said. So it's a praise to the parents, right? It's a praise to the mother, gave birth to him. Praise to the father that taught him Torah or sent him to learn Torah, right? Because that's the only way. That's the only anchor that we have in life that can give you a fighting chance to become who you need to become. Proper education. Now, Dan, the man's going to say, so what about non-Jews? So what about them? They also have to be educated the right way. They also have to go in the right path. So their responsibility, I would say, in certain ways, not as great, as the Jewish people. Punishment can be 10 times more severe, no question. Because there are a number of things that they'd be liable for. And they'd be liable for the death penalty. Because these things are universal. So they also have to go in the right path. 100% they have to go in the right path. But even so, what's going to keep them on the straight and narrow path? They need an anchor. They need something that is going to help them morally day in and day out. That's what they need. They need some sort of anchor. And if they don't have an anchor, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is anything can happen. No guarantee for nothing. A person sends their child to university, they come out, long hair, spiked hair, no hair, body pierced all over the place, other things, they don't even know what gender they are, and you wonder, what happened? What happened over here? Right? You wonder, come on. How could this be? So that's like playing Russian roulette in a lot of ways. What we have is, you can have in the modern Orthodox world, you can have, parents whose big thing is send their kids to Ivy League schools, University of Pennsylvania, Princeton, Columbia, Dartmouth, whatever, any of these universities. And many, I heard someone say this, so not claiming to be an expert in this, but I heard someone, who knows this like the back of his hand, claimed that a lot of the parents who sent their kids to Ivy League schools, they're happy they sent them, they got this great education, whatever, probably still paying for it 20 years later, right? They got this great education, beautiful, but the kids didn't come out the same. Religiously, they didn't come out the same. Right, now why is that? Very simple. Because you're thrown to secular society. In a secular society, anything goes. So if you tell me you're living a more sheltered life, you're living at home, you're not in university, this and that, still has an effect. Still going to have a negative effect. You got to say, but what about the power of Torah? Torah can protect the person up to a point. But if you stick yourself in a cesspool, what do you think is going to happen? You stick yourself in an environment that there's no way to win. It's only a matter when you're going to get broken down at some point. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Right? That's what's going to happen eventually. Doesn't mean it's going to happen straight away, but it's a very slippery slope. Very, very slippery slope. So comes along Rabbeinu Yonah. Says Rabbeinu Yonah wrote Shari Tshuva, Gate to Repentance, it's a commentary on Pirkei Avos. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, says over here, praiseworthy is she who bore him. Now the word praiseworthy, what's the word in Hebrew? The word in Hebrew is ashrei. Ashrei means to be praiseworthy. Right? We say Psalm 145, right? We say 3 times a day. Or 3 times a day. So ashrei, we say ashrei yoshvei veisecha. Praiseworthy is the one who's at home, sits at home, learns, and all that. So the word ashrei over here means praiseworthy. But what is it? What's a deeper definition over here? It means that it's all the good character traits that a person should have. Not just it means, it's praiseworthy, it's a good thing, tremendous thing. It means all the good character traits a person should have. So usually a particular character trait is mentioned. What do we say? It's not mentioned in a huge way. It's mentioned in a general way. Right? But if he has good character traits and he focused on perfecting them and staying away from bad character traits, huge thing. Right? It says in Path of the Just, it says in Mesilas Yesharim, the Ramchal says that obviously a person has to work on bad character traits. That everyone agrees. Right? But he says something to me with a huge novelty. And that is, he says you have to also work on your good character traits. Now that to me was a novelty. Why? Because if you got good character traits, what am I worried they're going to be bad? They're good. They're strong. Why do I think necessarily they're going to get weakened? I wouldn't necessarily thought that. But he says you also have to strengthen that. It makes perfect sense. You got to stay away from bad things. Right? You have to work on bad character traits. That makes perfect sense. But the fact I have to continually work on my good character traits, why? They're already good. Why should I worry I might lose it? Or it might get weaker? Says the Ramchal, it always needs to be strengthened. Even something you do good, perfect it. The Rambam says, the Rambam brings down if a person perfects one character trait. One character trait they perfect, they have an automatic ticket to Olam Haba. Automatic ticket to the next one. Because they took one character trait and they perfected it. They totally perfected it. So, working on bad character traits, I understand. Perfecting and working out on things I'm good at, who likes to work at things they're good at? You don't have to do that. Right? You mentioned the NBA Finals. Any athletes, they can't rest on their laurels. They have good, let's say, a person has good raw talent, tremendous raw talent. Raw talent doesn't butter the biscuit. It's got to be harnessed. It's got to be used the right way. Got to practice and continue to practice. You can say, yeah, but I'm already good at this. Doesn't matter. You continue to perfect it. Conditioning, other things. You perfect it. Now, doing that, probably not a lot of fun. Right? And athletes that train months, years, are they going to say it's all fun? I don't think so. Depends what type of training. But I can't imagine going over the same reps and doing this and doing that, different intervals. Sounds all that exciting. Right? You want to work at things that are harder. So at least you get better at it. But to still work on the same things I'm really good at, I don't know too many people are going to sign up for that. They'll say, no, they'll make it so good. No one will be able to touch it. No one will be able to go close. I got this move. I got this raw talent. And you work on it, you work on it, you work on it, you perfect it. When you perfect it, no one can touch you. Imagine if it's a positive thing that a person does. When it's something that's positive, so again, the evil inclination will say, why? Why should I do it? I'm already good at it. Now, it could be the other way. I could say, listen, if I'm already good at it, let me practice that. And I'll continue doing it because I'm good at it. I don't have to work that hard. And something that's much harder, something that's much harder, it's going to be hard. You're going to be more frustrated. Because, imagine, again, we use this basketball, parable here. So imagine for a person, it's hard for them, to bounce the ball between their legs. You want to fake someone out, bounce between your legs, this, that. Forget free throws, right? All right, free throws, other than things that are hard, right? Right? Free throw is a good example, right? So, something that's hard. So who wants to do that? Who wants to practice that? It's no fun. I can say it's no fun because it's hard. So we could look at it the other way. If something's so easy, then, let me work on that. Let me perfect that. But the problem is, let's say, someone's right-handed, right? They're right-handed. They can't do many things with the left hand, right? So if someone's guarding them, what do? They jump over to the right so they can't get to the right. They force them left so they can't use their strong hand. Or they do other things to stop that. So it's good to have other quote-unquote weapons in your repertoire, right? That you're able to use, and that'll perfect the person more, right? In this sports analogy, it'll help them more. Why? Because then they're going to say, okay, we're going to force this person left. But now he's got real good control with his left hand, right? So he can drive the lane and put it up with his left hand. Boy, that's kind of funky. No one thought he could use his left hand like that, right? So, there are times a person can do that. You can see it both ways, right? On the other hand, if it's something so easy and they perfect it, though, it makes them untouchable. Imagine, again, we'll give this example. Imagine a person can shoot, anywhere in the court, lights out, 20 feet, 25 feet, let's say, lights out. 90% of the time, they just keep taking shot after shot after shot. They'll hit them.
Yeah, three-pointers from downtown, yes.
Yeah, you get these 3-point shots. You get, people can hit 30%, 35%. Of the time, that's uncanny. So what's the person going to do? He's going to perfect it, keep shooting them. Eventually, he's going to hit most of them, or a lot of them, because he's good at that. So again, it can go both ways, right? You can tell me to perfect it, it's a lot better because it makes you better, okay. On the other hand, I can say, well, doing the same thing you're good at, why bother? Work on things that are harder to make you a complete player, let's say. But what are they going to focus on in practice? They're not going to focus and practice the things you're not good at. They're not going to do that. It's a waste of time. You want to work on it, work on your own time. Right? You're not going to work on, for the sake of the team because it's too hard. You have to stick at what you're good at. Okay? So Rabbi Yono over here says that when we talk about Ashrei, someone who's praiseworthy over here, it's talking about all good character traits. All of them combined. Not just one used in a general way. Right? So we have to keep that in mind. So here, the Mishna says, praiseworthy is she who bore him because, what did he do? He perfected himself. He perfected all his good character traits. That's a huge thing. That's a tremendous thing. It's not just like, okay, some people may say, well, they're only good at, everyone's got something they're really good at. Some of it's doing chesed, doing acts of loving kindness. Some it's learning, many hours at a time. Other people might be giving charity. Other people might be, I don't know, whatever it is. We all know what we're good at. We also know what we're bad at. But when a person keeps plugging and plugging and plugging, right? So usually it's one thing, two things. Where do you see necessarily in a person that they contain all good character traits? That you don't really see. You see someone who's humble. You see someone who never get angry. You don't see that. You don't see a person usually 100% a complete person. And it's very simple because, we all have evil inclinations. We all have drives. We all have different things. Wake up on the wrong side of the bed one day. Other things going on. Person under tremendous pressure, whatever. But there are other people that nothing bothers them. Take someone like Rav Victor Miller, blessed memory. He never worried about anything. Everything, it was good. Because he lived what the Chovos Levavos says. He lived what it says in Duties of the Heart. But it's a much harder thing to do. Because a lot of times, a person can be under pressure. Different things, all kinds of things. All kinds of things. They say, I think the number one cause, now I could be wrong, I have to double check this, but I think the number one cause in marital strife is money. Now, why is it money? Because there are other things you can live with your spouse, depending how bad it is or whatever. There are things you can live with. His spouse isn't perfect. They do this, they do that, do the other thing. There are things you can, okay, you suffer with it, but you can live with it. When there are money problems on top of it, then it gets exasperated. Then every little thing, gets scrutinized. And it makes things 10 times worse. Really, it wouldn't have been that big of an issue. Whatever the person did. But now there are money issues. Everything gets exemplified. Everything becomes a much bigger issue when it never should be. Now again, I'm not 100% sure that, that is the main cause, of strife. I think it's up there. I think I saw, whatever, a long time ago that was the case. But it could be, it's changed. But it has an effect. Money definitely has an effect, on a relationship. It just makes things worse. Because, okay, you can do security, other things, and a person can think, okay, you get some money in the bank, you have certain outlets, you can go here, you can do this, blow off a little steam, whatever, certain things you can live with. But if you don't have money, then you don't have outlets, then you feel like you're being squeezed all over the place, you suffocate. Right? Suffocate. Because that's, unfortunately that can bring down a marriage. Because the essence, I'm not saying the marriage is only about money. I'm not saying that. Right? But there are issues that couples have to deal with. That, they definitely have to deal with. And there are things that come up you don't expect. You totally don't expect. Right? It could be a trauma, it could be other things. And what can happen? What can happen essentially is that in normal circumstance, it doesn't get blown out of proportion. That's in a normal circumstance. It won't get blown out of proportion. But what happens when there are money issues? It gets blown out of proportion. That becomes a much bigger issue. I might have been an issue before, but it wasn't okay, I can deal with it. I can go out and get ice cream. I can go out with my friends. I can, there are other ways to deal with it. There are other outlets. But see, when a person feels like they're suffocating, they're getting choked on all sides, and you have no outlets, I'm not going to say a person's going to end it there, but they're going to suffer. They're going to suffer tremendously because they feel like there's no way out. Right? They're being choked. Now, anyone who's ever been in that situation, so they're nodding their head, they're like, yeah, it's true. It's very true because once a person feels like they're suffocated, and there's nothing to do, and whatever, who does it get taken out on? It gets taken out on the spouse. Now, it may not be the spouse's fault. Totally not their fault. Could be their own fault also. Partially. Or more than partially. Right? But even if it is, who are they complaining to? Who are they yelling at? Their spouse. But you should be doing this. You should be doing that. But if you're doing everything in your power, you're doing all your stuff, you're putting your best foot forward, you gotta do something. Well, sometimes you might have to. Sometimes you might have to take serious action. Whatever. But if you're putting your best foot forward, how can a person make such a statement? Where's the emunah? Where's the person's emunah? You know where their emunah is? In their back pocket. Because when you got money in the bank, however much, doesn't matter, you feel secure. When you don't have money in the bank, bills are piling up, things about to get cut off, you're frantic, right? Now, some more, some less, whatever it is. So where's the emunah? Doesn't God run the world? Isn't God in charge? So a person will say, okay, I'll take on this. I'll take on that. Again, this could be by sickness, by livelihood, by other things, right? So you say, okay, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work, guarding my eyes. I'm going to work on not speaking Lashon Hara. I'm going to work, I'm going to work on all these things. I'm going to work on a whole bunch of things. And I'm going to pray, and maybe a couple days a week I'll fast, and I'll do other things. And I'm saying 3 times a day, God, you're the one in charge. You're the one who runs the world. There's no one else besides you. And I'm working hard and doing all these things. Well, guess what? How come my prayer didn't get answered? God, don't forget about me. I'm in dire straits over here. Right? I'm suffering like no tomorrow. So how come you're not answering? Which is one of the single biggest mistakes people make. Not only that they make the mistake, but they think, listen, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. God, you should answer me. Right? Now, what's one of the worst things a person can do? It's called iyun tefillah. What does iyun tefillah mean? It means when a person prays, and they say, wow, I prayed so well. God's going to answer my prayers. So on that, not only is God not going to answer your prayers, but he's going to look at you and say, who are you? Going to open up your file over here. You're going to say, why? I think I prayed very well. God should answer my prayers. Does God need to answer our prayers? You say, of course he does. He has to help us. True? Could God decide he wants you to pray harder? He wants you to work harder? Yeah. Could he squeeze you? Yeah. Look at, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel had trouble having children. The commentary is saying why they have trouble having children. Because God likes the prayers of the righteous. He desires the prayers of the righteous. Now, that being said, if he desires the prayers of the righteous, why in the world does he want them to suffer? So the simple answer is I can't say why. But we can understand that when a person's in dire straits and a person's in trouble and they pray to God, their whole prayer is different. The way they serve him, right, is different. Everything they do is different. They're going to take on 150 different things in order to get God to do what we want them to do, to what we want him to do. So the problem is we live in a instantaneous generation. And we think, okay, I'm working on this, I'm working on that. Why haven't I got an answer? Now, it could be there are a lot of other things going on. God wants to squeeze you more, wants you to work on your faith in him, other things. Could take time. A person can say, yeah, but I've been doing it for 2 months. I've been doing it for 3 months. Just because the person changed and a person's working on themselves, and other things, does not mean God's going to give him what he wants. We may think, I'll give an example. One of the prayers we say, one of the blessings we say in the Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, is a prayer for parnasa, for livelihood. Now, people would say, if I had more money, I give more to charity. If I had more stability, this, that. Not that I should have what I need. They want more. So they say, God, why don't you let me hit the lotto? Now it's, Powerball is like 50 million, 100 million, whatever it is. And people say that, just about every single person that hit the lottery, their lives were destroyed. They have family, friends, the lives were destroyed. They ended up penniless in the end. It didn't help them. But we may think, if I had this, it's going to help. If I had that, well, we say, when we eat bread and grace after meals, we say, righteous person is never lacking. But then you can look around their house and say, wow, this is falling apart, that's falling apart, and all that. What do you mean they're not lacking? They're living, like the Avos Chaim, Avos Chaim, blessed memory, he lived in a lap of luxury. Someone came to visit him, and they said, Rebbe, his chairs are falling apart, when we buy new furniture. So Avos Chaim asked him, well, where's your furniture? And he answered, what do you mean? He said, I'm only passing through. I don't take my furniture wherever I go. So the Avos Chaim said, yeah, I'm also passing through. So do you think the Avos Chaim for 1 second, thought he was lacking? He was missing something? He knows, as King David says, we're only here for 70 years. Right? And if we have strength, we're here 80 years. That's it. Right? After that, it's a blessing. So we're not here very long. So if we're not here very long, I have to know how to use what I have. And you're going to say, what? Someone, once asked the rabbi this question, should I work harder, work extra hours so I can give more to charity? And his answer was no. You give as much as you can give. And then you move on, right? You spend that time when you're not working, learning. Taking care of the kids, whatever it is. But that's what you got to do. Who says you should work so many more extra hours so I can give more charity? Right? But again, what's the problem here? The problem is we think we deserve an answer. Why do we deserve an answer here? God gives us life, gives us food. Absolutely miraculous what goes on in the world and how he runs nature. So why in the world do I think, wow, I have a complaint, I'm going through a difficulty, whatever it is, God, you have to answer me now. Right? Doesn't the verse say, why should I remember man? Man is an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. That's what we are. In the bigger scheme of things. We live in a small, in a city, in a town, a city, country, continent, planet, galaxy, right? We're getting smaller. So in the bigger scheme of things, we can say, well, isn't God busy doing other things? Why is he going to concern himself with me? And the answer is, as Abraham said, why would you have, a world of design and the designer doesn't care? Imagine someone who's, planning the new World Trade Center. Right, working on all these plans and different things. You think he's working on the plans going to disappear afterwards? Not going to have his hand in it? Of course not. We can say, but God is so lofty, and this is a mistake many made, that God is so lofty, and therefore he's busy doing other things, and he allowed other forces to have power. He allowed the sun, the moon, the stars, wind, the oceans, other things to have their own independent power. Because God is too lofty, so he put them in charge. Problem is, goes against first of the 13 principles of the Rambam, right, of Maimonides. And that is God's absolute. And God runs the world. And God is in charge. So, if you say that God is not absolute, then you're right. Then these other things have power. Potentially, these other things have power. But they can't have independent power, the Ramchal says. Quoting Kabbalah. They can't do whatever they want. The Atlantic Ocean wants to make an earthquake and have a tsunami, and destroy half of Southeast Asia, put Atlas back on the map. No pun intended. Could it do it? Yeah, if God wants it. And if God doesn't want it, can huff and puff and can't do whatever it wants. But the mistake is I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing the other thing. Right? Why doesn't God answer me? And maybe his answer is, this is not what I should be doing. You know, it's kind of hard to hear for some people. But I think it's best for me. God saying otherwise. Right? There's a story many years ago. It was an Israeli soldier that was taken captive by Hamas. And the Israelis knew where he was, so they sent a team to go in and to try and rescue him. You know, they try and break down the door, and the explosives didn't work, whatever. They break down the door, and there are bullets flying all over the place. They kill all the terrorists. No Israeli soldiers killed except for the one that was being held captive. The one being held captive died. So during the Shiva, during the 7-day mourning period, so an Israeli reporter asked the father, so what happened to all the prayers? Yeah, the whole nation of Israel was praying that the soldier should be, let go and be free. So what happened over here? So some people may say, well, the normal response would be, is that, yeah, they all prayed and God said no. And God said no. But that wasn't his answer. His answer was that the soldiers there told the story that there's no way any of them should be alive. They went into a trap, seemingly a huge trap. Bullets, explosions, this, that. So he said that was where the prayers went. The prayers went to save all the soldiers, that just my son wasn't saved. So a person should never say, my prayers are going to waste. They never go to waste. They never go to waste. But see, we have our own biases also. We think we know what's best for us. And we don't see the bigger picture. Because the reality is, we're blind. And there's nothing more blinding than love. Love. Why is it blinding? Because the person's not thinking with their mind. They're thinking with their heart. Right? So that's not love, it's infatuation. Right? Love, very different. But that's not really the point. If a person, let's say, has been jilted, and they thought this was the person, and there was nothing to talk about, ready to get married, this, that, let's say got that far, it doesn't work out. Let's say it doesn't work out, for whatever reason. That person is broken. As well you could imagine. They're broken. Right? But now, what happens afterwards? Got to pick up the pieces, etc. But they end up, let's say in many ways, they end up growing in different ways, in leaps and bounds. They grew in ways they never would have before. But they thought this was it. And then what happens? Sometime later, they meet their spouse. They meet their spouse later. But in hindsight, they got crushed. They got totally crushed. But then they realized, look, if I would have married this person, look where I would have been. I wouldn't have been in a good place. I wouldn't have married what you married now. Maybe you would have said, if I had a chance with this person, maybe it would have been that way. Let's say you didn't know. You didn't know. But see, our minds get clouded by our hearts. We think this is the absolute thing. And in the end, when a person's broken by it and they have to move on, what's the first thing they're going to say if they're God-fearing? God, why'd you do this? This is the right person. Why are you breaking my heart over here? Right? Don't go breaking my heart. Why are you breaking my heart over here? Why are you making it so hard? Finally, found the person. What happened? But see, doesn't God know better than we do? He knows better. At the same time, God could set up a person with somebody that's totally bad for them. They end up, let's say getting married. It's a disaster. You gotta say, why'd that happen? Because God didn't stop it. You want it, you let it go. So we always say, if you want to go on the right path, God will help you. As the Gemara says, you want to go on the wrong path, God won't stop you. Well, let's make it easy. You're heartbroken. You're demolished. You feel your whole world's caving in, which it might be. But in the end, you got to say, why is God doing this? And what's the answer? We don't know. But God has an ultimate plan. How do we know he has an ultimate plan? We see it in life. It comes with age. It comes with life experience. Now, someone younger doesn't want to hear that because they're going through the difficulty. They're going to say it's going to be so good later. Okay, show me. Show me where. Show me how. But you might not see it 2 years later. You might not see it. Right? I had my own honesty for 17 years. A lot of things not explained. But a lot of good came out of it. Not saying it was easy, but a lot of good came out of it. Now, if I would have known that at the beginning, different story. But you don't see how it plays out. We have no idea how it plays out. So, we have to remember also, when one door gets closed, other doors go open. Other doors are open. They're going to say, great, I haven't seen the door open yet. You're right. It doesn't mean it won't. It doesn't mean it's sealed forever, right? It's sealed closed forever. It doesn't mean that. But the problem is, in this tissue generation, in this cream puff generation, we don't want to wait. We don't want to go through it. We want it now. And God says, I'm not giving it to you now. Because you don't see the bigger picture. And if you don't see the bigger picture, you're not going to understand. You only understand it later. You only understand it in hindsight, right? We'll play Monday morning quarterback, right? Because you just start the CFL, right? Monday morning quarterback will play. And now you start to connect the dots. And then once you start connecting the dots, whole different thing. Then you see each little thing, each little thing connects to the other. Maybe there's a pattern, could be. But if each thing connects to the other, what do we see? Tremendous thing. But it's very hard to see when you're going through it. And the thing that you prayed for, you said, wow, I'm glad God didn't give me this. Because that would have been good for me. So one of the things we got to pray for, in general, is that the things that we get are good for us. And they help us. Because we may think, I need this, I need that. What does God say? No. You don't need it. You're not going to get it. But we think, but I need it. Then sometimes God will say, fine. You want it, I'll give it to you. 100% I'll give it to you. But you're going to see it's not good for you. So I would say on that, 100% you got to be careful what you pray for. Because what you pray for may not be good for you. It may be totally negative. So here, let's go back to the person who got jilted. And the person thought, come on, what in the world's going on? You know, they've been waiting for my whole life. Finally, got what I want. And it gets taken away. But see, then you see 5 years later, or however much time later, you end up, let's say, you meet someone else. You meet someone else, and then it hits you. Then it may hit you like a ton of bricks. You never could have gone down that path. That wasn't necessarily a good path for any number of reasons. But we have to remember one thing. God knows how to run the world a heck of a lot better than we do. And you know, the way we look at things, you're going to say, but why this, why that? We don't have answers. A lot of things we don't have answers for. We might be able to see things in hindsight. That we might be able to do. But we have to get this idea. We have to get this idea out of our head. Right? We have to get this idea out of our head. And the idea is that I deserve an answer right now, whatever I'm going through. That I have to get out of my head. And we also have to realize God is the one in charge. And that is our mantra. You're the one who runs the world. You know, so our mantra is, okay, but I need this, that, and the other thing. Doesn't mean we don't have needs. But we have to know God's the one in charge. I can put my best foot forward and get a 0 and get a goose egg until God says, okay, I'm going to change it. Why did I change it then and there, whatever? We don't know. Nobody knows. But the mistake is no matter what we go through, no matter what the difficulty is, and we pray and we fast and we say Psalms and, you know, we're working on ourselves. Those are all good things. Those things change a person. I mean, the evil inclination stops. Doesn't mean that. But it changes who we are. Because we're in dire straits. We have no one to rely on except for God himself. So if that's true, then I'm already a better person right now. But I'm suffering, going through difficulty, this, okay? 100% true. 100% true. But we cannot forget the bigger scheme. That God understands what the bigger scheme of things is. And only later, again, in hindsight, can a person connect the dots. And this led to this, and that led to that, and, you know, a person could be able to connect the dots. And then you see, of course, it had to be. Of course, it had to happen this way. You know, nothing better than, you know, a person gets jilted. We use that as an example. And then, months later, or however long, they meet the one who they're going to be married to. Let's say. Are they going to think about the jilted one? Never. Because now they realize this is the one who they're supposed to be with. Right? How, what, where, when? We don't know. We don't know. You know, and when people meet, you might say, wow, this was chance. This, you know, it's all orchestrated. Now, can a person marry the wrong person? Yeah. That's the whole story. A person can marry the wrong person. You know, we're half the soul. We've got to find the other half of our soul. But a person gets so infatuated with someone, yeah, they marry the wrong person. It can happen. You know, and then, you know, it's a game of the Matrix. Because what about those kids you were supposed to have or whatever with the person you were supposed to be with, and now you're not going to be with them, and God has to change everything. Right? That's only by one person, right? We mentioned this before. Take someone who intermarries. You're not allowed to intermarry. Let's say the person doesn't convert. So what about the other person you were supposed to marry? What about that other half of the soul? So God now has to orchestrate. Well, that soul's going to marry. What about the kids you're supposed to have? Those souls coming out, all these different things. That's only by one. That's already the matrix. But if you tell me that it happens 60% of the time, 70% of the time, you need 20, 30, 40 supercomputers to track everything. And that's a disaster. Now, could a person marry the right one and mess things up? 100%. Could also happen. Because they don't work at it. Or, there are other things going on. Whatever the case is. Can happen. 100% it can happen. So, we don't see things just by happening by chance. Right? That we don't see. Well, we don't understand why. We don't. It's pretty clear we don't. But sometimes after the facts, God throws us a proverbial bone. He throws us a bone and he shows us why I might have had to go through this. But only after 120 years we're going to see what our decisions did, what the repercussions were, what the ramifications are. For sure. Very hard to see it now. Very, very hard to see it now. Now, this is a common theme that comes up. Right? So you'll ask the $1.5 million question, why is it over here that a person has to go through this? Right? It's a good question, which you don't necessarily have, good answers, unless, God shows us different ways. Right? So here someone points out, your emotions can be wrong, right? 100%. Right? A person's emotions can be wrong. So what's the question? So the question is, how do you know you're with the right person? So the simple answer is that a person has to realize if you're with somebody, one of the things that colors the whole situation is being physically involved. I'm not saying after you're married already, right? But once a person is physically involved, emotions take over. So in the ultra-Orthodox world, in general, both sides do not touch each other until after the wedding. You're going to say, but how can that be? Sounds a little bit square. You can't even cuddle, you can't this, can't that. Because when they're dating, obviously they're dating for the purpose of marriage. There are a lot of people out there, when they date, they're not dating for marriage. 100% they're not dating for marriage. This is a guy talking, they're dating for fun. They're interested in having fun. Right? Now, that's true. If it gets a little more serious, what's going to be. But what's the problem? What's the main significant problem? Physicality gets in the way. Now you're going to say, but how can a person know? So in the ultra-Orthodox community, right, people know what they're looking for. You want to have same values. Maybe you've gone through similar life experiences. Maybe similar families. Maybe, there are a lot of things that they're going to have in common. You want to build a family, philosophical outlook, other things. Those are important. The way someone squeezes toothpaste doesn't matter. Right? The physicality will come. That's, biology 101 or 101A will keep this clean. Right? So we'll get straightened out. That's really not such a big deal. What a big deal is that What happens when you can't touch? Right? A woman gets a period, you can't touch, 2-week period, give or take. Right? For about 2 weeks. So that means the spouse has to speak to their other spouse, in a way that's not intimate or not going to lead to intimacy. They have to talk. They have to have open communication. Is what they have to do. Because if not, if they only view the other person as an object, that's not going to lead to a healthy marriage. You have to do other things besides that. What happens when the person gets older? Wrinkles, this, that. They have a couple kids, body never comes back. Etc. So it's only about physicality. It's going to lose its flavor pretty quick. You can be innovative, this, that, up to a point. But what about conversation? When you can't do that? What, are you going to be nice to your spouse only 2 weeks of the month? Can't do that. Then the other spouse thinks it's being taken care of. Oh, you'd be nicer because of this. But if you don't have that, then what do you have? Right? So emotions, you're right. I would agree 100%. Emotions can take a person away. But if a person's involved with someone, without the physicality, can also have emotions. True. There are also emotions there. But see, without physicality, it's a much more complete picture. Why? Because you can talk about things. And not just about, physically touching and all that. Right? That's part of it. That's definitely part of the relationship, but not at the beginning. And a person also has to know, what am I looking for? What do I want? If you're not sure, think before you date. People have a checklist. What most important thing is? Top 5. I think people have like 20, 30 things on a checklist of problem. Right? So, you have to have a checklist. And obviously, both sides have to be attracted to the other. That's pretty crucial. But again, you have to know what you're looking for. But if two people come from similar backgrounds, they're looking for similar things, fine. We don't have to worry about that. No red flags. They meet, they, enjoy each other's company, they talk, this, that. After a number of meetings, that's it. They seal the deal. They get engaged, they get married 3 months later. Right? So in the ultra-Orthodox community, we have a very high success rate. Marriage is staying. Probably 90% more. Now you're going to say, wow, that's because we don't believe in divorce. Not true. Plenty of divorce, unfortunately. Brought down in the Torah, you can get divorced. Try and save marriages as much as we can. Doesn't mean that's going to be the case. But at the same time, person has to realize that, marriage is work. 100% it's work. Right? We have to work hard over here. 100%. But if you're going in the right direction, all things look good, why would I think the person's not for me? Right? In other words, why would I think they're not the right one? So a person can say, wow, isn't it a leap of faith over here? Do we know 100%? We're not going to know 100%. Nothing's 100% necessarily. But I would say, if you see what leads up to it, you look at the background, you look at conversation. There are people, let's say they meet, and they click, they never have any lulls when they talk. Now, when they're married, they might not have as much time to talk. They're busy, this, that, fine, but that's a good sign. Why? Because you don't run out of topics. That means you're comfortable with the other person. So that's a huge thing. Now, someone will ask, but is that a guarantee? I'm not going to say 100% a guarantee, but the only guarantees we know in this world are death and taxes. Not necessarily that order. We don't know there's a guarantee per se. But if enough things, enough boxes are checked off, I don't have to look for skeletons. Unless something comes up that, I might have to look into. Or something like that. But if that's not the case, person's gone out a number of times, why would I think that's not the right one? Now, people can have doubts. Women, when they get engaged, they can have doubts. And a lot of the doubts can be they're just scared, which is a normal thing. Totally normal thing. The question is what they're scared about, what they're worried about, is it real? Is it something, we got to look into further? Or is it just nerves? Now, I'm not going to make over generalizations here. But I would say there are a lot of things that are nerves. It's nerves. It's nothing more than that. Seen it with some of my own kids, and after the marriage, and the whole thing, whatever they were worried about, gone. I'm not saying there can't be something significant. If there's a red flag, you look into it. Even during engagement. Right? You look into it. And see if it's something to be concerned about. But if a lot of it has to do with nerves, again, I'm not just saying, wow, it's probably just nerves, blow it off. You have to see what it is. You have to see what the concern is. But I was saying, a number of times it's nerves. That's all it is. Nothing more than that. Could be, but it's nothing really, a lot of times probably nothing more than that. So, if a person's together and there's chemistry, and they like each other, they're attracted to each other. So now, again, if what's important to both of them, they check off the boxes of the other side, right? In other words, one of the opposite sex checks off, you have a certain number of boxes. They check that off. Why would I think now you're not going to be compatible? Unless something else comes up. Unless there's some sort of red flag. Can happen. Not going to say not. Maybe something got hidden and wasn't told to the other person until after the marriage, which is bad. That 100% is bad. I've heard cases like that, horrific cases. Oh, can't tell that person. Can't tell the family, it's Lashon Hara. Well, it's forbidden for me to say that. But you're obligated to at some point. 100% you're obligated, because then you mess the person up. Oh yeah, we said, there's a little bit of depression, but yeah, you didn't tell me they were manic depressant. Oh, we can't say that's Lashon Hara. You just messed someone up in the process. I know someone like that. Got totally messed up. So, is there a guarantee? I'm not going to say it's 100% guarantee, but so why do people get engaged and get married? After meeting 7, 8, 10 times, whatever. Because they feel comfortable enough with the other person. They feel comfortable enough that, they got all their questions answered. They check off all their boxes. Why should they think, unless there's something else going on, why should they think they're not the right person? What do you think is going to happen afterward? Now, you could say, but I don't know how someone's going to act under stress. So I'll tell you a story that happened. Crazy story. A guy's dating a woman, and, right, because that's the way it should be, right, a woman dating a guy, and he takes her out to stop at a red light. What does the woman do? Sitting in the passenger seat, which I would never recommend to do this. What does she do? She takes out the keys. Now, obviously, the guy can't drive, right? This is when the car has keys. I'm not talking about right? So, Dan, this is before your time, right? Keyless cars, right? So here, she got the keys to stop at a red light. Meanwhile, the light turns green. The guy's like, "Can I have the keys, please?" And she's just holding on to the keys. Meanwhile, people are yelling and screaming and honking, and he's like, "Can I have the keys?" And she doesn't give him the keys. Light turns red. Guy, what's he supposed to do over here? So finally, he says, "Can I please have the keys?" And finally, she gives him the keys. Light turns green. They start to drive. And this guy says, what happened back there? Like, why in the world, would you take the keys out of the ignition, have people honking and screaming? It's like, so this woman tells him, again, you can't make this up. This woman tells him, listen, how am I supposed to see, like, what's going to happen in the future? And you're under pressure. I wanted to see how you're going to act under pressure. This is what she tells him. And she says, I just want you to know, you passed the test. So she's all happy. And she goes, I want you to know you passed the test. Now this guy looks at her and he says, you did that to test me? To see how I'm gonna act under pressure? So he tells this woman, well, that's great. He said, well, you failed the test. He took her home. And that was it. Now, someone's going to ask, but how do I know? I never see him get angry. Never see him get angry. What about their anger? Should I do something to make them angry to see how they act? Should I put them under pressure? Is that something you can gauge? Sometimes it comes out. Maybe the person will get angry. Maybe, whatever. But there are things you can't. Everybody has anger at some level, right? Everyone has anger. But the question is, how can the engagement? There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure in general, and that's why they limit, men and women not to speak that much during that process. It's very, very tedious, stresses, this, that, whatever. There's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. But how can you gauge? It's almost impossible, unless it comes out in other ways. But how can you gauge how someone's going to act under pressure? Imagine the question would be, let's say you have 3 kids under the age of 4. The woman's overwhelmed, totally overwhelmed. And she's like, I can't take it anymore. I'm sleep deprived. Just take the kids, go out, something, whatever. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of stress. Do you have any idea how the person's going to act under stress? No. Do you have any idea how the person's going to, let's say the marriage is good and everything's good and then there's a trauma. Let's say. Do you have any idea how you're going to react? You have no idea. There's an article today, about a woman who had, 2 kids, 3 kids, and she had a certain fear. What was her fear? She got bitten once, somewhere in Florida or whatever, got bitten once and had bed bugs. They had bed bugs. And this woman had this fear. She just had this fear, like always checking the bed all the time for bed bugs and this and that. Anyway, she had a child. She had like a 2nd or 3rd child. And this, she became obsessed. Always checking, and sleep deprived, all kinds of things. It came out that she had some sort of postpartum OCD. What was the OCD? Bed bugs, of all things. Now, postpartum depression is a real thing. 100% the real thing. It can destroy a marriage. It can destroy the woman. You're going to get real serious help for such a thing. Now, could she guarantee, I'm going to have all these kids. I'm going to do this and do that and do the other thing. And I'll never get postpartum depression. She guarantee that? No. Is there any guarantee how you're going to act under pressure? Not necessarily. If a person's already been under pressure, see how they act, one thing. But if not, is there any way to gauge it? No way to gauge it. No way to gauge it. You can ask questions, what would this happen, what would that happen, but, what would you do? How would you react? First thing I say, I would never get mad. I would never do that, right? But imagine, you're up all night or you got very little sleep, and your kid did this, your kid did that. You don't think rationally when you're sleep deprived. There are things you would never think of doing in a million years. You end up doing it, saying things, whatever. So I can't believe you did this. When we got married, you promised. You're under pressure. You're under a ton of pressure. You're sleep deprived. We don't, person who's sleep deprived does not always act the best they should. You're going to say, don't be sleep deprived. Don't put yourself in that situation. There any guarantee? No. There's no guarantee. Now, is that something a person can know when they're dating? How are you going to know that? Listen, if you're dating a long time, you've been in a lot of different situations, maybe you could gauge it. Maybe. But something like that, you can't know for sure. And is that going to be a deal breaker? No. But you said no. What if someone does get angry? What if they have anger issues? Yeah, so it has to be worked on. Depends how bad they are. Depends what they do. Right? Everybody has anger at some point. I mean, too many people that have never been angry ever. That's not a deal breaker per se, unless they're abusive. Or they could be abusive. Now, is that something someone could know? Let's say the person has these tendencies. But you don't always get all the information you need. You gotta be a real good detective. Right? Or some people, let's say, someone, let's say, grew up in a messed up home. They grew up in a really seriously messed up home. But you see, you never asked the right people what type of home it was. Or they were afraid to say something. And what happens? What happens is the spouse that you married, you got messed up over here because no one told the truth. Because if anyone told the truth in such a case, what's going to happen? No one will ever marry into that family. Now, it's not your kid's fault per se, but you got lied to. So, what could be the simple answer? People are going to say, but this is the person who this is all from God. Right? Isn't this all from God? Isn't what God wanted in the end? Right? So people say this is what God wanted. But if someone would have given the right information, they would have got married. They wouldn't have married that person. 100%. They never would have married such a person. So you're going to say, someone may say, so what's the guarantee? No guarantee. There's no guarantee unless, if a person sees red flags, then you got to look into them. But if the person they're married to, remember, the Torah says that Adam was looking for someone who's an Ezer Kenegdo. What does the word Ezer Kenegdo mean? It means a helpmate for him, opposite him. Now, that means someone has to be totally opposite, but it's not a yes person or a slave. It means that they complement each other. Most likely, you're never going to find two extroverts that get married. Because one is going to try and outdo the other. Depends how extroverted. Right? In other words, one may be extroverted, one may be, introverted. Or not as extroverted. But if you have both that's doing the same, that's a problem. Right? Or let's say you have two people that are both, don't have a lot of confidence. Them being married, they'll never make decisions. You need someone who, has their feet in the ground, can make decisions, whatever. And even if someone who can't, they'll rely on them. Okay? Right? But if you have two of the same people, the exact same or similar, not necessarily so good. Depends. Again, depends what the character traits are. Right? But, if a person's married, and all things being equal, the marriage is a good marriage, relatively speaking, why would I think that the person's not the right one? Now, I would say, if a Jew marries a non-Jew and then that non-Jew doesn't convert, then whatever, that's the wrong one. There could be people that marry someone and they marry because of infatuation. Infatuation does not mean love. Love is something much stronger. Much, much stronger. The bond is much stronger. There are a lot of things you have to have in common. Doesn't mean you have to be exactly the same. Right? But, certainly in the religious world, a lot of things have to be the same. I heard a horrific story because this person was standing next to me. One day, a few weeks back, I was going up north, and they were lamenting to their friend, whatever, they got married. And this guy's not anything she thought he was. Like, he doesn't go to synagogue, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that, he makes excuses, blah, blah, blah. All right, he's going on and on, back and forth.
Totally
Finally,
opposite.
Yeah. So this friend asks us, so why'd you marry this guy? Why in the world did you marry this guy? So, I don't know what's going to happen here. I certainly didn't get involved. They didn't ask me, right? And, I wouldn't have been interested in getting involved anyway. But, something like that, there is a problem where you marry somebody and then you find out they're not what they said they were. That's also a major issue. Can happen. Saying, I'm getting the best guy in the yeshiva, but it was all a fraud. It was all a fraud. But they put up a good facade. They faked it, so to speak. And now look what you're left with. You're left with a bum. Doesn't get up to pray, doesn't learn that much, whatever. You got a bag of bones over here. You got lied to. Now, does that mean the person will never, they'll never stay married together? It doesn't necessarily mean that. But the spouse that got this bag of bones is going to be rip-roaring mad. Totally rip-roaring mad. See, within Judaism, there's a much stronger bond. Goes well beyond infatuation. But see, love only comes after marriage. Let's make clear. Once emotions and physicality get in the way, it's over. And then you can't see things clearly. You can't think, love will come. There's no question. Now, in the secular world, this is a big novelty for a lot of people. Because they're going to say, how could you not, be physical? How do you, that doesn't make any sense. That's part and parcel of the same thing. Right? But once the person gets emotionally involved, emotionally over here means physically, you don't think the same way. In other words, what you see is skewed. Because the reality is, maybe it's, again, this is a guy talking here, maybe it's not about this deep bond at all that this guy feels. Maybe it's just what he can get out of her. Maybe it's just lust. Maybe. And statistically, it's a very high statistic. It's also a scary thing, if you think about it, that men and women, let's say that meet, that hook up, many, many times it's under the influence of booze. Why? You don't have as many inhibitions. Because if you had certain inhibitions, maybe you wouldn't do this, that, and the other thing. Right? A lot of it has to do with the social environment, which, has its own issues. But see, now you're telling me someone drinks, and a lot of it has to do with that. What happens? Your inhibitions go down. But a lot of it has to do with what? Physicality. That has to do with lust. That is no, I'm not going to say it's not a place in Torah. There is a place for that. But it has to be harnessed in the right way. So people will say, so why did God give that strongest temptation? You know why? He gave it to you to harness, to use it in the right way. Totally abused today. There's nothing to talk about. We're gonna keep this clean, at least PG-13, right? But when how do emotions get involved? Emotions get involved. You talk. You empathize. You listen. Body language goes a long way. There are a lot of things that are good. When people talk. And women. Sometimes they just talk and talk and talk, but they don't want an answer. Right? It's a big mistake people make, guys make. And they think, now you got to do this, you got to do that. But they weren't interested in an answer. They want to emote. That's all they want to do. They want to be heard. They're not looking for a solution. Right? Men have to learn, what makes a woman tick. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Good book to read. Very good book to read. Difference between men and women. Many differences. Many, many differences. So we have to understand the opposite sex, 100%. Understand what they want, what their needs are. Right? But again, a person can connect deeply on an emotional level, talk things out, and this, that, nothing to do with physicality. Once physicality, again, gets in the way before marriage, it's a block over here. It's something that's, it just gets in the way. Totally gets in the way. When it doesn't get in the way, you have to see the person for who they are. We mentioned before, if a person can't be with his spouse 2 weeks out of the month, well, guess what? You have to deal with them in a different way. You have to speak to them. You have to have conversations. You have to listen to them. It's not just, let's do something else. Even though most guys don't want to hear that, right? But it goes two ways. In a woman, I think, a woman wants to be taken care of, wants to be loved, wants to be cherished. Yeah, physicality comes into it, true, but it's not the whole picture. It's definitely not the whole picture. No, it's part of the picture. But again, all things being equal, I don't have to think, if things are going well, I don't necessarily have to think and say, well, doom and gloom, who says you're the right one? Well, who says you're not? Right? Who says you're not over here? Let's say you meet somebody 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, you've gone out a number of times. Let's say there's nothing stopping you. You heard everything you need to hear, so we're not getting engaged. You have to come on, it's too little time, it's this, it's that. Whatever it is, you don't have any blocks anymore. You found out all the information you need to find out. What information you think you're going to find out is going to say, no, well, she squeezed the toothpaste from the bottom. Up, you're out. All right, what are you going to find out? What's gonna push you away over here? You found, again, I'm just using a general case. You found out everything you need to know. Background, family, where they've been, what they've done, their drives, their goals, this, that. They check off all your boxes. You didn't have that many. They check off all the boxes. So now someone's going to say, how do you know? How do you know they're the right one? So now, why would I assume they're not? This isn't infatuation. Love will come later. I get it. But you're seeing things at a totally different level now. Because you're interacting. You're talking. Their emotions also. Not going to say not. Yeah, fun doing different things. Whatever. But a lot of it has to do with background. And where you're coming from. I mean, I met my wife in a totally unorthodox way. And that's how it happened. I was up north after Sukkot, and friends of mine met friends of hers. I was in yeshiva. She was at Hebrew University. I made her sit next to me on the bus, totally unorthodox, a 3-hour bus ride, going back from Sfas to Jerusalem. And at that point, I already knew her background, different things. Was she religious as I was at that point? No. But, and she said, like, how do you know? I said, do you have any questions? No. Do you have any doubts? No. So, that's it. If you have no doubts. But we didn't, every time we went out, 2 hours, 3 hours, conversations, this, that, the other thing. You were never alone in conversation. You can say, because you like to talk. Maybe. But it went both ways. So this coming week, God's help, 30 years. And we got engaged after 2.5 weeks. When did I get engaged? You're going to love this. When did I get engaged? Went back. We went back to the States to announce our engagement. So I was at my uncle's house. It happened to be the holy day of Thanksgiving. So I bought champagne before. Halftime. Halftime for the football game. I was the champagne and mazel tov. They said, for what? They thought I was crazy. 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. They thought I was nuts. So, but again, what's the concern here? Are we going in the same direction? Yeah. Was my wife older where I was at that point? Not necessarily, but, She said you took a chance. I said, you're right. But I said, I saw certain things that I didn't think that was going to be an issue. Could have been. It was an unorthodox way, no question. Definitely no question. But at the end of the day, I kept saying the same thing, like a broken record. So what are your concerns? Money wasn't an issue. Going to sit and learn, want to go teach, whatever, this, that. What's the concern? I mean, she had a concern. She had a legitimate concern. How do you know I'm going to be like this and be like that? There wasn't a guarantee there. I took a chance, no question. But I saw that she's going, in that direction. So that being the case, everything we spoke about, our goals, backgrounds, this, that, were similar. We're very, very similar. So why would I have thought in a million years that this is not the right one? Now, I mean, there were a lot of other things that happened. She wasn't looking to date, other things going on, different things. And this, her guard was down, other things, a lot of miracles here in different ways. And she wasn't really supposed to be there, whatever, the whole story. It was a whole story. 30 years later, still here. So another 30 years, here's Hashem. Right? But, that was never my question. Because I knew what I wanted. I knew what I was looking for. With my wife, that she was 20 years old at the time. Her classmates thought she was nuts getting married so young. Certainly in the secular world. So I would tell them, it's like playing, it's like playing grown up, but for real. In different ways. But again, if all the boxes check off, everything checks off, what are we worried about? If I would have said, well, in 20 years or in 15 years, we're going to go in a spiral turn and going to lose all my money, how are you going to react? I never would have thought of such a thing. And you can't even answer such a thing. In no possible way. There could have been other traumas, God forbid. Right? I can tell you. If we weren't together in so many different things, marriage would have dissolved a long time ago. A long time ago. A lot of difficulties along the way. A lot of difficulties. Money wasn't one of them up until 15 years ago. That wasn't an issue. Family issues, other things, plenty of things. I had to fight for every last thing I've ever had, in many ways. Not complaining, just the way it is. That can take a toll on a marriage. Has to be united fronts. How'd you know, she's going to be that strong? I didn't 100%. But I saw she wanted to go in the right direction. She wanted to go on the right path. She wanted to do the right thing, and she was learning. Right? So why would I think otherwise? I had no reason to think otherwise. So again, what could happen is, person go through a trauma and a difficulty and something else, what can happen that could destroy a person also, true? But that's already after the fact. Right? When a person gets married, let's just say, in the other Orthodox world, when a person gets married, they may have, some doubts before they get married. And after they get married, what happened? Things got solidified. Again, I'm not saying everyone's got the happiest marriage. Something, obviously, you have to work at. You have to work hard at. But at the same time, God puts two people together. That's what God's busy doing on a daily basis. Right? He's making matches. Making matches between men and women. Not such an easy thing to do if you think about it. Because, people come from different families, different backgrounds, some similar, some not. And and I was convinced at that point I would never marry an American because I loved America so much. I was like, there's no way I'll marry an American. Right? My wife would say, how could you marry an Israeli? They would never understand your jokes about sports and TV and this and that. I was like, well, I guess, it's a good point. So I said, yeah, that'll never happen. What did God do? Just the opposite. And where did I meet her? Here in Israel, of all places. And she came to Israel like the last second, signing up for this year program, whatever, the whole thing. The whole thing. So yeah, there's a lot of divine providence in all marriages. A lot of divine providence. I can tell stories till tomorrow. My own kids I've mentioned a number of times. Total divine providence. And when you see the minutiae of detail, what happens? So you're going to say, but, isn't that uncanny? Yeah, it is. But it's miraculous. So how do you know they're the right people? I see. It's pretty clear. See, pretty clear how they interact. Again, there are better marriages. There are weaker marriages. They may need, work and this and that. May have to go to therapy. Could be. Doesn't mean the person's not right for the other person. The person can be a perfect person for the other person. They go through something and they collapse. I don't think this guy was thinking of divorcing his wife because, bed bugs. Wasn't thinking that, but he had to get her help. He had to get her serious help. Something like that. Yeah, the family was getting destroyed. Totally destroyed. She couldn't function. Now, did he ever expect that in a million years? No. You got to deal with it. We're thrown with different things. It doesn't mean the person's not right for them. They just go through, difficulties. This is what we got back to said at the beginning. A lot of problems. Many problems stem from the fact of the problem with money. I'm not saying it's the only problem. People have emotional issues. Other things. So, but I think that's certainly up there. So, it's a question of how we look at marriage, how we look at the person we're with. And I think for a lot of people, they say, of course it's the right person for me. So many ways. Can I know 100%? Nothing's guaranteed. But there are a lot of things that make sense. Someone's more dogmatic, somebody not. You can't have, you cannot have two people that are, take the bull by the horns. You cannot have that. Because then someone's going to control the other. Or, it's like a control thing. I'm not saying one has to be totally docile over here. They have to complement each other. That's what it means, Ezer Kenegdo. Complement each other. A woman's not a yes person. A woman's not a slave. She has certain obligations to her husband. Husband has certain obligations to her. And there are a lot of times let's say better. The Gemara says a husband has to love his wife more than he loves himself. Now, that's a very hard statement. The reason it's a very hard statement is because nobody loves anybody more than themselves. But there are things that we wouldn't do, us guys wouldn't do for ourselves, that we should do for our wives. Even if we ourselves wouldn't do it. Not only that, it gets us to help and think about others. We're all in it together. We're working 100% together. Because if you're not, it's just, well, he's going his way, she's going her way. That marriage will never last. In different ways. Because what can happen? Okay, you have kids, you have that in common. Kids are out of the house, then what? Then that's going to be a problem. Because if you had your own lives before that, you sort of crisscrossed and this and that. You never spent time to work on it, so what's going to happen? It'll die. Doesn't mean it's not the right person, but you blew it, or you're blowing it. Because it's like anything else, right? I once spoke at a Sheva Brachos, one of these 7-day parties for people to get married for the first time. And it could be they were just humoring me. But I told them, I said, a flower has to be watered. Has to get plenty of light, has to get water. If you don't water a flower, a plant, what's going to happen? It'll die. 100% it'll die. This is botany 101, 101A. It'll die. A marriage, if you don't work on it, doesn't matter how long you've been married for. Could be a marriage now out of convenience. It could die. Does that mean you're not the right person to be married to? No. It means you yourself blew it. So it's something you have to work on. Constantly you have to work on. Because, life throws very funny wrenches at us. Things that we never expect. And if you don't have a united front, you're not working on that, they're, not going to work. Discipline. How do you discipline kids? Parents should never fight in front of kids. They have to have a united front. And even if they disagree, you never disagree in front of the kids. No, you never do. You can disagree, but, you talk about it behind closed doors. Marriage is a work in progress. It takes effort. It takes a lot of effort. We live in a disposable generation. People don't want to work on anything. They want everything fixed. It's like a light bulb goes out. Fix it! Now! Okay, I'll get to it. Fix it! Okay, this room will have a little bit less light. We'll deal with it. That's the world we live in. Our spouses know us the best. They can bring a woman can certainly make or break her husband. She's going to run the house. She's going to do what she wants. She's got the real power. But at the same time, she has to compliment him. He has to compliment her. They may not agree on certain things. Okay? Question is, can you live with it? It depends what it is. If it's not something egregious, let it go. Don't want to get to you. If it's something that needs to be discussed, okay. If not, you figure out how to deal with it. But, again, a lot of times I would say it's not worth it. You let it go if it's not going to have a major effect. You have to know when to let things go, when not. But if a husband is like so serious or over serious in the house and dogmatic and this and that, that's, you're putting fear in the house for no reason. That doesn't help anybody. We have to know how to focus. We have to know, what's important. And there are a lot of good, books out there about marriage, about Jewish marriage, and how it works. We need to read them. People should go to parenting classes, to perfect what they want to do, how they want to raise their kids, and how they should raise their kids. And whatever, we're living in a very difficult generation today because of the power of the streets and all these things. Very difficult generation. So, a husband has to treat his wife like a queen, and she'll treat him like a king. It goes both ways. The problem is we get busy, extremely busy, chasing our tails day in and day out. So husband and wife have to have time, just to talk. Has nothing to do with the kids. But we have to remember, as we said before, if we're going in the right direction, all things being equal, someone's going to have to show why they're not the right one. I could say if both agree, they understand the backgrounds, where they came from, and different things, and they connect on a deep level. Guess what? Why should I assume otherwise is a problem? I don't have to assume there's a problem. So there is what to know over here. 100% there's what to know. Can a person be fooled? Now, technically, yeah, I'd say a person could be. Could be emotionally. They get. I don't know what the word is. They get. They emotionally, person can be involved, but not seeing what the real picture is. Really like sidestep, let's say. Sideswiped. Something like that. Can happen. But if a person's thinking in logical terms, and their hearts are being pulled. So usually they know, though. It's usually something somebody knows. If they're compatible or not. They can also know they're not compatible. Person dates, first one, they know, totally not for me. So what do we normally say? Go out a second time just to see. You go out a second time, yeah, that's it. Like, a person knows. But it takes time. Some people can know off the bat. Some people, it can take more time. For them to be able to see it. That's why you have to give it a certain amount of time. If not, you don't want to be too quick to make a decision. But usually first instinct is probably right, I would say in general. A person can have a terrible date. Doesn't mean they're not necessarily compatible. Doesn't necessarily mean that. But in the bigger scheme of things, if we don't see anything wrong, we've done our due diligence, let's say, then the assumption should be this is the right one. I don't have to assume otherwise unless there are other issues. And you could have other issues, even the person is the right one. Doesn't mean the relationship is perfect. So it doesn't mean that at all. But we have to remember that, it's a work in progress here. Total work in progress. We're going to have to work hard. That's what marriage is. I don't think that people necessarily want to work so hard. That's their choice. Because any little difficulty is going to throw them off. And one thing, I'll give free advice here. One thing is that, while we're on this topic, parents, unless they absolutely have to, parents, if the kids are having difficulty, whatever, they should never get involved. In general. Not for us to get involved. They want to marry this person, they have to deal with it. If you have to get involved, you have to get involved. Well, I can tell you the first case I ever saw sitting by the rabbinical court of my Rebbe, it was a messy divorce case. And they brought in someone, who was trying to help in the case, right? A therapist, whatever. And basically he said, I'd love to be able to help. They asked him, can you help this marriage? He said, yeah, what's the problem? What's the main problem? The main problem is both parents are interfering, both sides. He said, if they were out of the picture, I could probably help you. So, there's definitely an issue with that. We have to know how to deal with in-laws. A different thing. But parents should never get involved. They don't have to. Should never get involved. That's a mistake people make. When I had people tell me many years ago, when your kids get married, there are two things you have to learn how to do. One of them is you always have to have money in your pocket to give them. And the second is you have to learn to keep your mouth shut. Now, there are times you might see things you don't like and whatever, but, you can't do anything about it. You got to keep your mouth shut. So I said, that's great. I have 2 strikes against me. So one, I got a big mouth, and 2, I don't have so much money in my pocket. But but the second thing is the cardinal rule here. Shouldn't say anything. Certainly if you don't have to. You don't get involved. Not for you to get involved. Let them work it out. I told my kids, I told their husbands, I said, you walk down the canopy, my daughter walks around you, that's it, she's yours. 100%, she's yours. You got any problems? Deal with it. I said, I'll be there to help if I need to. But I said, you're getting married, it's your choice. I'm out of the picture in that sense. I'll do whatever I can help the other things, whatever, this, I don't get involved. I shouldn't get involved. The people said, come on, you really said that? You really said that to your future son-in-law? They said, yeah. I said, 100%. Because I want them to know two things. One is, we're not going to be menacing in-laws. That's one thing. And two, listen, you're old enough to get married. You make your own decisions. Enough for me to get involved. And their marriages have been ruined because people got involved when they should not have. There has to be a balance. There are a lot of things. A lot of things that go for Shabbos and festivals and different things that you get along with, you don't get along with, whatever. It's complicated. It's complicated. Right? But husband and wife have to work out things between themselves. For an in-law to get involved, never. Should never get involved. They might have to. They may have no choice in certain ways. But you want to ensure that your kids are happy, stay out of the picture. You don't go over the house unannounced. They can come to you unannounced, that doesn't matter. They, raid your refrigerator, other things. Certainly, you to go to them unannounced, you shouldn't do it. If they say I'm going to be home, come over anytime, that's one thing. But you don't just pop in and say, well, I happen to be in the neighborhood, can I, so I popped in. You can't do that. You should come when they invite you. You don't want to be over-imposing. Right? Otherwise, they get resentful. You don't stick your nose in where it doesn't belong. Now you're going to say, isn't that something obvious? People think, well, they don't think that way. Some people. What are they going to say? Come on, I raised my son, I raised my daughter, I have a right to come in. I don't have a right to come in. You have a right to come in whenever you want. You got to give them their time, their privacy, different things. Now again, sometimes it might be hard. All right. They come to you, they say, listen, we're coming over, this, that. You open the door. You welcome them in. You to go to them, you got to ask. Now again, you would think, isn't that common courtesy? Yeah, it is. Some people overstep their boundaries. And again, there are a lot of times that trouble brews when people overstep their boundaries. 100%. They could make or break a marriage. Definitely. They stick their nose where it doesn't belong. Now again, in general, I'm not a therapist here, so you can take what I say with a grain of salt. But the point is that if a parent needs to get involved, they should. But in general, they should stay out of it. Thing is, how do you know when? It depends on the situation. But a parent should never interfere. If you wouldn't raise their kids the way they're raising, okay, their choice. You can make suggestions, hints, maybe other things, but they're not your kids. And sometimes for parents, it might be a very hard thing to watch what their kids do. To watch what they do, how they raise their kids. And there might be nothing you can do. So if there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can do. You do your best, be an example. But you have to let them do what they need to do. Even if we go against what you think is right. So then, if you want to navigate, and try and help them, you have to know how to do it. But you have to do it in a way they can hear, they can handle. So whatever, parenting is hard. I would always say, You know, if your kids are, old enough to have kids, okay, so they'll deal with them. They'll deal with them. Why do I have to deal with them? So it's also catch-22. Maybe they're doing things that, maybe they shouldn't, or this or that. You don't necessarily have a say. And sometimes it's very painful to watch. It's painful to watch kids make mistakes. Painful. And sometimes there's nothing to do. You have to watch them make mistakes. It's out of your control. Now, you can try and guide them. You can try and help them. But if they fall flat in their face and it's their choice, a parent should never say, see, I told you so. That's like sticking iodine into a wound. They already realize they're flat in their face. You don't have to add to that. You know mitzvah to add to that. But sometimes watching it's painful. Very painful. Sometimes that's what we have to do. But I can say with clarity, people that interfere in their kids' lives are going to pay a price. One way or another, they're going to pay a price. Now you can say, wow, I got to do something to save them, this, that. Again, it depends what it is. But in general, they're old enough to live their own lives. If they come to you for advice, one thing, we shouldn't interfere. Interference causes problems. Places one spouse against the other, and we should know what's going on in their lives. It's personal. Why should I know what's going on in their life? The people think it's funny. He said, really? You told your son-in-law that? I said, yeah. I said, she walks down that aisle, you walk down that aisle, she's all yours. Good luck. Good luck. But that's the right attitude. I'm not saying you should necessarily say it, but that's the right attitude. Because not your saying. You don't have what to say over here. They made a decision. Very good. I'm going to interfere. I can help out as much as I can and keep my big mouth shut. So that's hard. That's hard on a lot of levels. But okay. So people say, what's it like to be a father-in-law? I said, you have to ask my son-in-law. But there are things you see that make you, turn your head. Make you think, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? So, it's a very fine line. Very, very fine line. When to say something, when not to say something, how to say something. And I think there are people who make serious mistakes by opening their big mouth. If they don't ask for your advice, don't give it. If it's something egregious, different thing, okay, again, person may have to get involved. If not, it's none of your business. They have to deal with it. But you're going to say, come on, it's hard to see. You're right. There are a lot of things that are hard to see. I can tell you my own personal life, plenty of things I can help with other things. People didn't ask for it, okay. I'm not forcing my opinion on anyone. Oh, when you get burned, don't come to me. It's too late. Right? I'm not going to give unsolicited advice. Sometimes as a parent, you have to. Even if you know they're not necessarily going to listen. You have to say something. Right? But I found out if you get burned enough times, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you shouldn't give unsolicited advice. But as a parent, you might have to anyway. You might have to swallow some pride, some ego. Okay? But it's it's a hard thing. What's the old adage? When they're little problems. When they're big, bigger problems. They have to navigate their own, they have to find their own way. But see, we're going to educate them in a way where finding their own way is through Torah and mitzvahs. And if there's a problem, you go to a Rav. He tells you to go to a therapist, you go to a therapist. Right? But you have to have guidance. It's also crucial. You don't act without guidance. One thing's, been ingrained in my head for many years. You don't have clarity, ask. There's no stupid questions here. And then some of these questions could be life and death. Could be absolutely crucial. But we say also, when should a person, start taking parenting classes and learn about what it means to have kids? 20 years before they're born. You're like, come on, I get married at 23, I was only 3. How can I read books about parenting? Right? But the reality is, how can you have kids? You don't know how to parent. People have kids anyway. Right? But it's crucial because we lost a lot of these tools. A lot of these tools we lost because where did parenting come from? In general. From our parents. Right? But our parents might not be the best example of parents. They just might not be. Because their parents weren't such a good example. That's what we should learn. Akiva Tatz should be well. Said of his cousin, Rav Simcha Wasserman. A blessed memory, son of Rabbi Chaim Shem Yikam Damoy. Right? God should avenge his blood. Famous student of Rabbi Chaim. And Rav Simcha Wasserman was an expert child rearer. Expert in how to deal with kids and this and that. The problem was he never had kids. He never had children. He didn't merit to have kids. So Akiva Tatz asked him, how could you be such a world expert? In dealing with kids. If you never had kids, because he said, I saw my parents. I learned everything I saw in my house. We can't say that today. We get over scrutinized, for better or for worse. We punish a child, they get called the police and charged for harassment because we put them in their room. I'm not saying we abuse them. I mean, it's a crazy world today in regards to respect to parents and this and that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not saying it's total failure. Their kids got it right to honor the parents properly, speak to them properly. It's a hard mitzvah to do. Very hard mitzvah to do. But there are obligations. How to interact, how to speak, this, that. Parenting is a very hard thing. People say, come on, you have so many kids, how do you expect to parent all of them? Yeah, and if you have 2 kids, there are people that have 2 kids that don't parent them. Neglect them in other ways. It certainly happens. So, it's something that has to be learned. And if you learn it from your parents, great. If not, you have to learn. And there are people, unfortunately, their parents were not good role models. So how do they know what a healthy marriage is? How can they get married if they don't understand what a healthy marriage is? So yeah, they may mess up exactly what their parents did. Maybe. But they have to relearn and rethink what it really means. And that's a hard thing. Embarrassing thing, I would think. Different ways. Right? But the reality is we live in a messed up world. And there are people out there, I'll go on record because we're videoing this. And that is, there are people out there who should never be parents. Now, God doesn't necessarily stop them. And they bring children into the world, okay? But there are people out there who should never be parents. In the secular world, I don't know, maybe in the 60s, there are people who read Dr. Spock, and about child rearing, this and that. How many in the secular world took any classes in parenting? I don't know too many. Now, it could be it's a different generation. People don't listen to Dr. Spock anymore. I don't know. But I never heard growing up, certainly in the secular Jewish world, that case. People would talk, deal with their kids this way, that way, whatever. But to actually take parenting classes, read parenting books? I'm not going to say it never happened, but I never heard it. Could be. Maybe it's 1 in 1,000, maybe higher. Parenting's a lost art. It's got to be learned. Now, further than that, good parents and loving parents, they understand what a healthy relationship is. They understand how to discipline. They may not agree with everything, but okay. They understand. It's been a lost thing. That's why so many, what are some of the best books that are selling are self-help books. Why self-help books? Because a lot of things got lost. A lot of good books in the market. about Jewish parenting, the way of Jewish parenting I deal with teenagers, different things. Again, doesn't mean it's easy. But yeah, a person has to have the tools. And if you don't have the tools, you got to learn the tools. You're going to say you have kids anyway, but what benefit is to have kids if you don't know how to deal with them? No benefit to that. They're just going to get messed up in the process. So, you're going to say, so what do we do? It's like anything else. You got to learn. You got to learn. You got to learn what marriage is. Got to learn about raising kids. Got to learn working on ourselves. And being married, having a spouse, you might have to work on a lot of things. Work on anger, work on, complimenting the other person, work on doing chesed, acts of loving kindness, a lot of things. And there are some things that maybe go against our nature. Doesn't our spouse, the person's married, don't they know how to push the buttons? Right buttons or wrong buttons? They know how to push. And they push the wrong button, person get in a tizzy, so to speak. Get totally lost. Why? Because they hit certain raw nerves. So I would say like this: if a person they know when a button's pushed. You have to have mechanism to deal with when that button's pushed, what to do. Because a lot of times you just want to scream out and lash out. You can't do that. Or a person will get so mad they'll brood and won't say anything for 2 days, then they'll be back to normal. That's how they, some people deal with things. Also not so healthy. So, when we look at the bigger picture, what's going on with all this, you see it's a huge responsibility. Because who are the biggest role models for kids? Parents. They're the biggest role models for better or for worse. I tell my kids in school a lot of the day, throwing in the Orthodox world, majority of the day, and who their friends are, and they're learning, and this and that. Yeah, but where does the most education take place? At home. And we, the parents, are our worst enemy. We have good days, we have bad days, all kinds of things. All kinds of things over here. So kids see us in our best light and our worst light. So when they're younger, they don't know how to make heads or tails out of certain things. When they're older, maybe they understand things a little bit better. But they still don't want to listen. They need boundaries. Well, they want to do what they want. But within the Torah world, it's totally different. They have to show respect. They have to honor. They have to honor parents, different things. But it's hard in both ways. You don't want to be too authoritative. You don't want to be too permissive. You want to have, a certain leeway. You want to have a certain leeway. And just because you like things a certain way, okay. Right? But that, a person can't be dogmatic. Can't say, well, it's my way or the highway. I'm not saying you should compromise and do things you don't want to do and give in to things you don't want to. Parenting today has become very complicated. Every generation has their different thing. Different evil inclination. Today, once kids at a certain age, like they don't think they need to listen to parents. Parents live in a different generation, different things. They don't know what's going on today. We're more aware than they think. But even so, I went to parenting classes years ago. This Rebbe said, whatever your kids come home with, you got to be like the Rock of Gibraltar. You got to be strong as a rock, no matter what. And that's not always so easy. But, kids have to have a nurturing home. Parents have care. Not just ask them what they did on, what they got on their test. They have to show interest. They have to listen. When they come home, let them tell all their stories. Even though we're busy, whatever, we have to hear what they say. There's give and take, whatever, but they have to see that they're heard. There are times a person, parent may have to do something and show that they defend what their kid has done. Might have to do that. And the kid sees that, they feel, okay, they understand. They get it. It's not just about them. But whatever, this is a huge topic here. Marriage is a huge topic. Raising kids today, it's definitely a big topic. There's no question. At the same time, we have to realize we're in it for the long haul. And even if the kid is not doing what they're supposed to do, as long as they're not having such a negative effect on their siblings, you never throw a kid out. Never. It might be hard, just like in school. You have to have a backup plan if the kid doesn't fit in the school, right? But you can't just throw them on the street. Where's he going to go? He's going to feel like a loser. He's going to feel like they can't fit into, whatever. It's hard. We mentioned before, person may have to see things they don't like to see. They don't want to see. And it's painful. You know what? We don't have to live our kids' lives. We have to, there's an obligation to help them even after they're married. Right? To give them guidance even after they're married.
Yeah, raise, yeah.
You don't stop being a parent. But you have to know also when to keep your mouth shut. And that, for some people it's not so easy. But when you see destructive behavior, okay, then you might have to take a stance over here. But it's
intervention, yeah.
We're fighting the secular world in so many ways. Nobody's living insular today. Nobody. We don't live in a cave. The world is is at the palm of our hand. We see it, we hear it, we know what's going on, so to speak. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, but at the same time, we have to give our kids, to the best of our ability, Torah values are going to stick. And then whatever they do with them, okay, it's their choice. No one's a cookie cutter here. No one's going to come out exactly the same no matter what system you put them in. They're not going to come out the same. Some will be stronger, some will be weaker. Some will go off a little bit, then they'll come back. Some never, whatever. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of things going on in the world that we don't control. We're not in control. There are things we do control. But as Rebbitzin said, you got to be like the Rock of Gibraltar. No matter what they bring home, but you have to give them Torah values to the best of your ability. You intervene when it's absolutely necessary. But again, I've seen a number of times people, stuck their nose in where it didn't belong and caused havoc. Caused absolute havoc where it didn't need to be. Well, I'm going to say something anyway. You don't have a right to. There are people that are strong-willed, they don't care. But, you're going to cause other problems. So what? I have a right to say what I want. Rule number 1 and rule number 2. And rule number 3. You don't stick your nose in where it's not wanted. You might have to say something at some point, maybe. But I would think there are a lot of problems that start and end with that. And the parent has to know that. Like I said, told all my son-in-laws, you're getting married, she's all yours. You're not going to hear from me. You want advice, you want something else, whatever, we can talk. I'm not getting involved. None of my business. You deal with it. If I have to, I will. But there's no reason to if you don't have to. So, marriage in general, if the kids see a happy marriage, kids should be fine. In general. Kids see marriage doesn't work and there's divorce, yeah, it causes problems. Not saying to stay together just because of that. There are people, should never stay married, cause all kinds of problems. I get it. Right? But any of these things, anything worthwhile, you have to work at it. You're not going to be handed anything on a platter here. And no one should ever think they will be. As we mentioned before, I guess I'll end with this, that, we're living in difficult times. There's so many different ways. So many different ways. So the Torah doesn't change. The Torah 100% doesn't change. We have to give our kids the best values. And where are they going to learn the values from? They're going to learn it from us. So we have to internalize the message. And sometimes even if we're down or whatever, we have to get ourselves up on the right page. Because our kids are going to see right through it, even at a relatively young age. Oh, it's hard. I don't think there's any question. But if you're not prepared and you're not working on yourself, it'll be a disaster. That I can guarantee. Some more, some less. And we're our own worst enemy. And if a person doesn't work at it, the kids will say, oh, it's do as I say, not as I do. That's bad. Because again, where do kids get their education from the most? Parents. And if we have a bad day, one word could destroy them. It has to be a lot of other things in between, but we got to be very, very careful. Very, very careful. Even though we think maybe a kid should be really severely punished, for certain things, we got to be very careful. And if a person has to punish, the punishment has to fit the crime. And a person should never, ever punish out of anger. You punish out of anger, the kid doesn't understand the message, it's bad. Right? These are just tips. Again, I'm not claiming to be some, parenting guru or, marriage therapist, or marriage therapist. These are just general things that everyone has to work on, I think. But these things are lost. That's why there's so many books on the topic, good books, that, we have to be retaught because, something got lost over here. And we're living in a totally messed up society, so kids have to know what the right values are. They'll be taught in school, and hopefully they'll get the right values, certainly religious schools if they go to religious schools. But again, they'll have questions, they're going to come to the parents. To the parent, they have to be on the same page. They have to be learned enough to give over information. If not, they have to go ask. They have to go ask how to answer such a thing. And kids ask good questions. They're not asking questions to be heretics here. They want answers. They want boundaries. We have to know how to give them boundaries. We have to give them space, but, we can't be too dogmatic. But, again, there has to be, it has to be in between. Can't have it one way. Can't be too permissive. Can't be too authoritative. You got to bend the rules sometimes because you just might have to. You have to know when to and all that. But we got to be prepared. Having kids relatively, make it easy. Having kids is no big deal. How to parent is a big deal. And how to deal with them is a big deal. So that we have to work on. We always have to work on. So even if a person, again, can't take anything for granted. A person been married many years, it's still something you have to work on. And if you don't work on it, it'll die eventually. So I guess on that note, we're going to have, I guess, a part 6, because we didn't really get that far because I got totally off topic, which can happen. Next week, I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be here. I might be out of town, but I'll know that at the end of the week. And we're going to continue actually in this idea about education, because something else, is going to come up about what we want for our kids and different things, which I could have gone to, but then I'd be speaking for the next 2 hours. So I figure we'll stop there and we'll continue with part 6 next week.
Right on, Rabbi. Well, thank you so much. I think you were spot on today. Lots in there. Definitely, folks, feel free to share, like, and share the video. We appreciate everybody that tunes in on the Noahide World Center social media network, and So, anyways, okay. So we may not be on for next week, but we'll let you know. Keep an eye out for the advertising post. I always make sure I slather it out there on social media that we're going to be hosting the class, and I'm so grateful that Rabbi Coffman keeps at it. You can't go wrong with ethics, but you need to get the depth of it, and I think he's really starting to unfurl some.
I think you just made up a word. I don't think slather is a word. I don't think you can use that in Scrabble.
Well, I don't know if yeah, it's like soap,
Maybe,
right?
I don't know. I'll
Well,
have to have
you're
someone-
appreciated.
She's much more of an expert in English than certainly I am. So we'll have to see if slather's a real word. But I'll take your word for it at the moment. We'll see.
All right. So we're going to sign out for now. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.